Priyanka, thanks for the very generous introduction. And I also want to thank CISO platform for making this possible to connect people interested in cybersecurity from across the world. And thanks to all the people who are chiming in, listening to this seminar. And I know you're all from different parts of the world. And I thought I'll give you my geolocation where I am. I'm currently situated in Lafayette, Louisiana. And for people who are not familiar with the geography of United States, Louisiana is in the southern part of U.S., just on the north of the Gulf of Mexico. We are between Texas and Mississippi. So it's a great pleasure for me to speak and share some of the experiences I've had, some of the knowledge we have found through our research. So in this particular talk, I'm going to talk about how to diffuse the cyber threats using malware intelligence. And so the key takeaways are, so this is things I think, I hope it's not paradoxical here. I want to say that malware economics, just the cost of writing malware, the cost-benefit analysis, if you wish, it demands reusing code. This is the programs that drive malware, and the reuse of code is what I'm going to say is the source of intelligence. We can use evidence of code reuse as a mechanism, as evidence, as fragments of evidence to connect attacks. And if we could harvest this information automatically, and which I'm going to say that it is possible to harvest this information, then we get it has very strong implications. And the biggest implication is that we can now convert malware that is typically a source of pain, is something that keeps you up at night, into a source of value. Value in the sense now we can convert malware as some sort of a spy on the attacker, the creator of the malware itself. So in some sense now it becomes a valuable asset rather than just a liability. And then the other implication is that you have, most companies have antivirus scanners, investment in antivirus scanners. And people typically claim that the antivirus scanners are dead because of signatures are dead. However, these scanners are still tried and trusted, and they are doing a good job. And now we can leverage this investment in antivirus scanners that are dutifully catching malware to the extent they can, and we can now use them as more like a sensors for tracking malware and extracting intelligence. And once we can do that, we can now use it to detect targeted attacks. And targeted attacks are attacks that are specific or targeted towards an organization. And typically, these are attacks then you may not find in different organizations. Like they may not be widespread. So when attacks are not widespread, typically they avoid being detected by antivirus scanners. However, what I'm going to make a case is that when you introduce code reuse, there's just a fact of malware economics that you're going to reuse code, and that you have the scanners that are collecting malware. We can make connections between malware that have been stopped by antivirus scanners to enter your territory. We can make connections between them, and we can get evidence of targeted attack. So that's the key takeaway. We're going to depend on malware economics. We're going to make connections between malware code. We're going to use antivirus scanners to catch whatever malware they've caught. And we're going to extract information from malware caught by antivirus scanners to detect targeted attack. So that's the key takeaway. So with that, let me first pose an interesting thought question that I like to pose to my audience, especially when I'm doing live talks. And just to tell you that a little bit about myself here, I'm a bit handicapped sitting and talking to a computer. I'm not used to talking to myself through a computer to an audience that I cannot see. I usually like to interact with my audience, and I'd like to throw some questions. So here's the third question. You're at home, and you notice that a window is broken. And so you say, well, it could be a prank. Maybe some kid, if you're in India, maybe it hit with a cricket ball. If you're in US, maybe a baseball ball might hit the window, or just someone threw a stone. Maybe some kids have a prank, or maybe it could have been an attempted robbery. Maybe it was someone trying to break into your house, and a car went by, and they just ran away. And so, what do? Do you investigate? Investigate as in find out what it was. Was it a prank? Was it a robbery? What was the intention of whoever did it? Or do you say, well, let's just fix the window and carry on? Now, since I can't get your responses, my gut feeling is that you're most likely to at least investigate and say, okay, what was going on? Was it a prank? Was it a robbery? And you're unlikely to just say, oh, let's fix the window and carry on. And if you found more evidence about that it is really an attempted robbery, you're likely to call the cops and investigate further. So this is the case where in the physical world, even if an attack is unsuccessful, you typically investigate the attack. And so that's the leading third question again. The next one is you arrive at work and you find that your Windows, in this case Microsoft Windows, is broken. Broken in the sense that it's not behaving the way it was supposed to behave. Maybe you have an ad popping up when you are in a browser. Maybe something that you say is not right. It's broken. And again, being a security guy, you might say, well, it could be a prank. It could be an attempted robbery, as in someone trying to steal information from your computer, from your company. And so now what do? Do you investigate to determine if it's a prank, whether it's an attempted robbery, or do you just fix Windows? I should have put Microsoft Windows here. Do you fix Windows and carry on? If I'm not mistaken, most of the time what happens is you fix Windows and carry on. And in that case, what happens is an interesting dichotomy between physical world and cyber world. In the cyber world, unsuccessful attacks, even if the attacks have been prevented, are rarely investigated. Successful attacks that happen to make news are typically the ones that are really investigated. If the attacks don't make news, they are very rarely investigated, as in trying to attempt to discover the intent behind the attack is very rarely investigated. So why this dichotomy on the physical world and the cyber world? And I'm going to posit that in the physical world, the attacks are not as frequent. You don't have your Windows breaking every day, or it's not shattered every day. So you're not really overwhelmed by the number of attempts. And whereas in the cyber world, there are just too many attempts on a daily basis. So if you were to just investigate every possible attempt, there's just no possible way to do that. It's just not feasible. And sometimes it's very even hard to differentiate between a prank and an attempted robbery. In general, we don't have tools to do it. We just don't have the resources to do it. And what I want to present in this meeting is that there is a possibility that we may have now with the new research that's been done in this context of malware and security, that we may have the resources now to investigate these attempted robberies, so to say, in the cyber world as well. Okay, so Prinka has already given introduction about me, so I'm going to skip my introduction slides, and I'm going to move on to my outline. So what we're going to have is, I'm going to talk about malware economics. The first thing I want to convince my audience, you all, that it is really feasible to extract information. It is not feasible. First, it's reasonable to think of extracting information from malware. So it's driven all by malware economics. So we want to understand what are the economic pressures on malware authors and attackers. And then the second part, I'm going to talk about that how to extract intelligence from malware and really to show that it is feasible. The third part, I'm going to show a case study where we can demonstrate that intelligence extracted from malware can help us connect attack. And finally, I'm going to talk about what you can anticipate in the new technologies that may be coming around from the research that is just about coming to a conclusion, some of the work that's now come to a conclusion. So with that, and I also want to add, if you have any questions about my talk, during the talk, I believe on your right panel you would see some place to send a chat message. And if you send a message, that will go to Priyanka, I believe, and towards the end of the talk, she will forward the questions to me and we'll answer a few questions. So I'm going to try to keep my conversation maybe go till 11:50 my time, so we'll another 35-40 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions. So first, the economics of malware. So first thing first, you know malware is software. And if you've written software or if you manage software development, you know software development is expensive. So why is software development expensive, or is it really expensive? And this chart here that you have is a graph that is produced by an organization called softwaremetrics.com. So the software metrics, they measure software cost of developing software and other factors. And this graph, it says on the bottom, the x-axis shows some notion of size of software in terms of function points. And people who are not familiar with function points, you can crudely consider function points as some notion of features, the number of features in a program. So if you have 50 features, you have a certain amount of cost, and you have go x-axis, you go along that axis. You have 50, 500, 2,000, or you go to 14,000 features. These are the function points. On the y-axis is the cost given in terms of hours per function point. This is the number of hours you'd spend per unit, per function point, not the total function point, just a single function point. And the graph shows that as the number of function points increase, so your complexity of software is the number of function points, and typically there's the interaction between function points. As the number of function points increase, the hours per function point increases exponentially. So it's when you only have 500 features, let's say, your hours per function point is barely an hour. I mean, it's an hour or so per function point, 500 to up to maybe 1,000. But as the number of function points go to 12,000, your number of hours is about 40 hours per function point. And when you go from there to 14,000, you're talking about something close to 120 hours per function point. That's an extremely significant increase. Now, malware is software, and since it's software, it's not immune to this fact. This is just a fact of life. If you're going to write software, and software is complex, you're going to have this cost. And if you have looked at code, malware code, for example, code written by most recently released by the hacking team, or if you looked at code from Zeus, you can see, looking at the code itself, the code is extremely good in terms of software engineering skills. It's extremely complex in the number of things that code needs to do, and so it's typically extremely complex. So it's fair to assume that the malware is expensive to write. And when so let's look at another part on the malware development process. So malware development process follows pretty much the same process as software development. So you typically implement the, you start with a requirement, or before that maybe you have a plan, you have a requirements, you implement, you test, and then typically you deploy. However, in the context of malware, you have, let me see if I can use my highlighter, okay. All right, so you typically have a plan, requirement, implement, test, and deploy, and you keep going through the cycle, because typically in software development you have an iterative process. If you're in the business of selling software, you're going to be adding new features. Your requirements will change, you'll add new features, you implement, and you keep going through the cycle. Now, an additional thing malware has is that it has the cyber pressures from the cyber defense mechanisms. So you have antivirus running, you have your you have some mechanisms in your environment that will stop the malware from operating. So you have this defense pressures, and those cyber defense pressures add new requirements on the malware. So that typically it has to defeat that cyber defense mechanism. And so those requirements typically get introduced by some notion of protection. So you typically have a protection mechanism added in malware. That protection mechanism, most common protection mechanism is something called automated diversity. Automated diversity is when you take one malware and you use some automated mechanism to generate a whole lot of variations of the same malware. So they look different, but they're essentially the same. So your malware development process has the software development process plus an additional layer, which is the defense mechanism. And the defense mechanism also has this mechanism to produce a huge number of variations of the same initial malware automatically. So that's keep in mind the software development process plus defense, and you're using automated diversity to create a lot of variations. Okay. Now let's look at the attack process. Malware is just one single component. That's a code. But the attack process, if you look at, and it goes something like this. Attack starts with some notion of probing the environment. So someone is going to probe your environment to understand what ports are open, for example, or they may probe your environment not directly, but through social engineering, for example, through LinkedIn. They might identify who are the people, who are the managers in your business, who are the secretaries in your business, who are the tech people in your business, or they may probe your environment to learn about your vendors. So somehow you probe the environment. And this probing goes deeper. You understand the people, you understand the resources, the applications that are accessible. You probe the environment. So this is a lot of time could be an offline activity where you probe the environment. But after that, you have a notion of exploit. Exploit could be someone sends an email to a user or a particular target users, maybe the system admin, maybe your secretaries, maybe the vice presidents, or maybe the vendors, your vendors. You send mails, and typically one of the common vectors is sending email, and email with the intent of sending some infected attachment to look for some vulnerable user. A vulnerable user would be someone who would be who can be enticed into opening the application or visiting a link and stuff. So you typically probe the environment and you identify potential vulnerable users or sometimes vulnerable applications, and then you attempt to exploit them. And it's not likely that your first attempt would succeed. You're likely to fail, and then you keep going through this process. You find other users, maybe other applications, and you try to exploit those applications. So at some point your exploit would be successful as an attacker, and then once you enter the environment, you want to escalate the privileges. You escalate the privilege as in you install, you run some code, you try to get admin access, or is this a most common one? Or you may then, or else you put yourself, your code in an environment where it is going to run on its own on startup, or when it will run when some other application is run. And again, it's possible you might fail. Maybe you have antivirus defense here, and that may not let you enter in some ways even after you exploit, and so you're not back to probing, exploit, cycle, escalate. So you go through this process as an attacker. It's not just very straightforward that you just enter an organization. You go through many attempts before you get to the point that you can establish yourself in an organization where you can now go undetected for a long enough period of time so that you can escalate, you can steal information. And so this is the part where your organization is most vulnerable, where you have an attacker who has established a presence and extracting information. But the key part is this phase here, the first phase, probe, exploit, escalate. That phase is expensive for the attacker as well. if you look at it from an attacker's perspective, there's a lot of information to be collected on this side. There's a lot of attempts to be made from probe to exploit, and a lot of failed attempts as well in escalation part. So we need to keep in mind here that the attack process is repetitive. You've got to have lots of attempts before you have a success. Now, let's put it all together. In the third part is the malware ecosystem. So the way it goes is something like this. Malware authors. So you have in this part, in this graph, let me read it out to you. You have this graph, malware authors. These are the people who actually write the code. Remember, we said this is an expensive process. Writing code is expensive. So these are typically specializations. They're shops that write malware code, just like the hacking team or like the Zeus author. These people write malware code. But these are not necessarily the same people who actually attack. They use the malware for attack. Instead, what they do is they sell the malware, license the malware, or do some mechanism to other groups. For example, malware author, like the hacking team, might sell their code to government or corporations or other competitors. Or you might sell it to in the underground on this site, which is the bot herders. Now these are the people who actually spread the infection. So these bot herders will be using your malware and the exploit, and they create some notion of a botnet. So this bot herder is not necessarily the person who writes code. It's most likely the person who is leveraging some code and managing this machine. And it's a lot of time and money spent in doing this work. So this becomes a specialized activity as well. Now the bot herder then may sell the services of the bots to organized crime. So the organized crime may not have hackers in their own payroll, but they may use the services of bot herders, or they may buy the services. Or there are websites where you can go and buy botnets. So they have organized crime. So these people are specializing in monetizing the botnets. So the organized crimes knows how to convert the botnets into money, and the bot herders don't necessarily have that specialized skill. Similarly for commercial spammer. So what happens in the malware ecosystem is extremely high degree of specialization. You have malware authors on one end, and you have people who use malware to infect machines on the other end, and then you have further people who actually use those botnets to monetize it. It's just like any industry. They have lots of verticals, and they have lots of horizontals. And even the malware author part is extremely fragmented. You have people who write the malware code, the people who write the defense mechanism for malware to protect the malware, and they are not necessarily the same people. There are groups of people who just specialize in creating automated diversity. That's their specialization. There are people who write bots malware so that you can create botnets, the notion of protocols for botnets that are communicating. So when you put it all together, let's put it all together, the implication of malware economics here. So we said the code is developed iteratively, just like any other software. It has intense predatory pressures, so it has to have some notion of automated diversity or protection mechanism. And there's a high degree of specialization in the market, which means there may be a few vendors who write the code, and there are a lot of other people who actually use the code. So the number of authors may get limited, or there might be people who write libraries. For example, in the context of Zeus, they have libraries, for example, to communicate with banks, and these libraries know the protocol that the banking applications use. That's a high degree of specialized knowledge, and those are typically captured in the library. So when you put this all together, what it implies, there's a high amount of code reuse. So there could be code reuse just because of iterative developments. Different versions of the malware will carry on the similar code. There could be a high degree of reuse because of automated diversity. Lots of different variants, but really essentially the same code. There's a high degree of code reuse because of market specialization, because you may use the same library. Different malware may use the same library. So when you look at this high degree of code reuse, it automatically implies that if you could connect malware, you can get intelligence from malware. Right? So also I should add that there is also multiple attempts before success. So success doesn't come right away. So if you factor this in, what it really means is if, for example, the attempts have been defeated by antivirus scanner, your malware scanner, then the malware that you have stopped from infiltrating your organization contains some information that you could potentially use to connect malware. So if you could connect malware, you can have now this side where you can say you can extract intelligence from malware. So here's a scenario. Let's look at it. Let's say this is a piece of malware that entered or attempted to enter through in your organization through the web. So maybe you went, someone opened a link, and that link was infected. Your antivirus scanner dutifully protected it, and so you got this piece of malware. Maybe there's another piece similarly from another website, maybe a different website, and you got malware. So these are two pieces of malware coming from the website here, and maybe here you have some malware that has come through email, maybe an email attachment. And you have this collection of malware, maybe from whatever other sources you got malware. Now, if I could draw a connection between malware, for example, this connection here is some notion of shared library. Maybe this is one of those banking Trojans. So you have this Trojan, that is, the two of them are using the same shared library. Both of them came through some website. And now you have a malware here. This is another malware. They both came through, maybe they just came, all you know is they came through same email or came via email, but you don't know any direct links between them. Maybe you have this group of malware that have the same behavior. Now, if you can make connections through code, then you could find, for example, this malware shares a library from another malware, which happens to share code with yet another malware, which happened to have come from email, maybe by email to two different people or from two different sources, some sources email. Now this chain of connection tells us the malware that you have here, which could have come from both sides, web as well as email, is related to a malware that came from just email. And if we could connect this over time, you might find that the connection might give some evidence of targeted attack. As in, if you find that if you go through the attack process where someone is attempting multiple times, you might find that the attempts that have been defeated, and if you can find connections between the code in that attempt, it will give you some indication of a targeted attack. Now we could find, for example, we can use this malware intelligence to connect actors. This is the inferred information. We can use intelligence to discover trends in terms of, in this case, for example, shared library. We could use these connections to determine families. So we might find that Zeus is related to Duku because it has similar code. Or we could track evolution, as in how malware is changing its attempt, the kind of attempts it does to infiltrate or extract information from an organization. Now, it just so happens that this is not new. That malware intelligence in use has been used. Is being used in the industry. In particular, for example, this report from Semantic talks about Duku. This is a rather dated report, 2011. It says parts of Duku are nearly identical to Stuxnet. And for all people who remember Stuxnet, this was supposedly a worm created by, supposedly created by US and Israel intelligence agencies to infiltrate Iranian nuclear power plants or nuclear reactors there. So the claim here is that by looking at the code, because it has a similar code, they find that there's a relationship between Duku and Stuxnet. Now these are supposedly different family. They have completely different purpose. Stuxnet was directed at one target, Duku is directed at completely different target. But the inference is that they're likely to be written by the same authors, or at least they're using some same source code base. Now that's intelligence extracted by people in Semantic. This is malware researchers in Semantics by manual analysis, by actually studying the code. You can find many such reports by Kaspersky, Trend Micro, McAfee, giving similar information about various different families of malware, where they study the code and they find interconnection. So to some extent, the industry is using malware intelligence. The key difference is they do extract this intelligence manually. They actually manually study malware and extract intelligence. So what we're going to do different is extract malware intelligence, but we want to do it automatically. And the trigger for this has been essentially a major trigger for this comes from U.S. Department of Defense. In this case, the DARPA, one of the premier research agency for U.S. DoD. And in 2010, DARPA kicked off this project called the Cyber Genome Project. And the goal of the Cyber Genome Project, that the word genome stands for, is to some notion of extract DNA. As a fine print here, you'd see that it says technology would develop cyber equivalent of DNA to identify cyber attackers. So that's the key thing. We want to look at code and we want to extract something notion of equivalent of DNA from code, and the DNA of the code should help us then connect the attackers. That is the essential goal of US DoD. And there have been similar other projects, research projects, pushed or triggered or supported by the US Department of Defense. So the things that I'm presenting to you are essentially things that are not just I've created out of the blue. It's a research area that is being significantly pushed, being envisioned. I mean, this direction is pushed by US DoD. And just to recall, so people who are not aware, DARPA is the agency that that created the internet. The early research by DARPA is what led to the internet. DARPA's research also led to the infamous drones that we have. DARPA research led to stealth fighters. And so DARPA is the preeminent research agency, and the kind of direction is pushed is typically some sort of a far-reaching directions. And in this case, DARPA is about 5 years ago created the Cyber Genome Project. And what you're going to hear today is something that came out of this project. It's the outcome of the Cyber Genome Project. And let's see. What we want to do in a broad sense is we want to, if you want to envision here, is create some notion of Google image for malware. So people who use Google image essentially what happens you do is you upload an image on Google, on image.google.com, and it's going to tell you what are the other images that are very similar to that image. So it's going to search the web and give you index list of images of what is similar. And what I'm going to talk about today is something similar, where we say we want to do something similar for malware. So essentially what you do is you have this Google image as a system, you upload in it malware, a query malware. It says, okay, here's the malicious program, you upload it. And Google has this Google image for malware has a large collection of malware that it already has. So this is the quarantine malware. This is all your malware that's been caught by antivirus scanners and so on. And outcome should be the clear nearest match. What are the very similar malware in this collection? So let's look at a more visual form of it. So here's imagine this is a website, and which we actually have this a screenshot from a prototype in my lab. So it's a website where you upload a malware, and in this case the malware is being represented by the SHA-1 hash. So you upload a malware. So you're searching for this malware, and what you see here is the search results. It gives you a list of other hashes that are very, very similar to the malware that is being searched. So this is search from quarantine, things that you already quarantined. Gives you the SHAs of all of the quarantine hashes. And of course, it's not sufficient to get SHAs. You want to also get other information about this particular binary, each of the files that are matched. And in this case, what we have is we look at something about, because these have already been stopped by antivirus scanner, we can say, what does a particular scanner tell you? And in this case, we are connecting with VirusTotal and extracting information from VirusTotal. So what you see here is Semantic. For example, these are all these malwares that we have in our collection. And for these, Semantic says that the third one is this Trojan so-and-so. The fourth one is some WS reputation 1, fifth WS reputation 1, and so on. These are names. And but more interestingly, it says that the first two were not detected by Semantic. So this information from VirusTotal that, okay, Semantic didn't consider these two to be bad, which is the useful information. But I think the most useful information is the right column here. The right column gives the time when the malware was first seen in the wild. First seen in the wild means first seen at least by VirusTotal. VirusTotal, for those who may not be familiar, it's a website, it's a service operated by Google, where you can go query for malware, you can query malware hashes, and it will tell you what the different scanners, antivirus scanners, tell about the malware. So this got about 46 or 56, I forget the count, of malware scanners it runs, and it gives you information about, for every binary, what any of the scanners says. Now that VirusTotal also maintains the time, the date, when the first time someone asked VirusTotal about that file. So that's the first seen time. So it gives you the first seen time here. We're using the first seen time by VirusTotal. Now the interesting thing here is this. Look at the earliest time here. The third malware that we are seeing is found in October 3rd, 2010. Okay, so that's a very, very old, in this case, malware, and it's similar to a lot of these other malware. So that's an interesting finding here, that we can actually connect malware using this technology similarity thing. How do we go about doing it? So I'm going to watch my time, make sure I'm on track. So this is the process. I'm going to give you an insight of what the process is. The process of extracting information from malware goes something like this. You take the initial malware, and then the first step is remove this obfuscation. Obfuscation is the automated diversity that I talked about earlier. You somehow remove this automated diversity or any kind of protection mechanism to somehow get access to the raw or the original malware code. And then you convert this malware into some notion of what's called in research world as a document. So document here is not the same as a Word document or any other text document. Document is just a phrase used to represent, to say it is extracting information, but it's just a research phrase. In the research community, we use the phrase document. And the idea is we want to have some notion of words. We want to take the malware and we want to create a notion of words, and sequence of words will be a document. And the notion of words is not the same as the words in the text document, but it's some abstract notion of words. So once you create the document, you can create indexes. You create the document and you create some notion of indexes. You map the document onto a notion of a feature vector, and you create index. And this index then provides you a mechanism to rapidly search through a very large collection of documents and find other similar documents. So that's the key part. Remove obfuscation, map to document, create index, and search. From a research point of view, the big challenge is in the first two steps. Remove obfuscation and map to document. Once you have completed this part, the rest of it, create index and search, it already exists. The capability of doing create indexing and searching exists. For example, Google Images. I could use the same algorithm used by Google Images, except for instead of using image, I'm going to use malware. So that research, that knowledge already exists. So the key part is how do you remove obfuscation and how do you map to document. And in this is where we, at least I have had a project in the DARPA Cyber Genome. I had a project in the Cyber Genome program, and in that program we came up with this concept of semantic fingerprints. So semantic fingerprint, semantic is essentially a fingerprint created not from the binary, as in just the text, but it's semantics. Semantics is some notion of meaning, or rather what is the program trying to do. So the attempted behavior of the program. So we created a notion of semantic fingerprint. And the semantic fingerprint is closer to DNA, as in a DNA captures some notion of what traits of a particular organism. So it has encoded in it, in the amino acid sequences, a notion of trait, what the behavior would be. And the same thing happens with semantics. So semantics essentially ends up becoming something like a amino acid, and you have a sequence of semantics that will end up becoming something equivalent to a DNA. So you have the benefit we have is when you have semantic fingerprints, this is resistant to obfuscation. It really gives a very nice mechanism to index. So you can do an indexable search, and it's relatively noise-free. And this is a invention I'm extremely proud of, and this is currently patent pending. So this core part, the semantic fingerprint, addresses the first two problems that we have: remove obfuscation and map to document. So I'm going to give you a little bit more gist into how it goes. So this is roughly what a view of code obfuscation. You have some code, and each of the arrows that you have, right, you have another second piece of code, the third piece of code, and fourth. But all of them, they essentially do the same thing. In a notion of programming, whatever same thing means, they are really doing the same thing. There's nothing different, except the code. The sequence of code is very different. You can look at visually, see that they're not the same program. There's not the same text of the program, but they're actually doing the same thing. So from a DNA point of view, this is essentially what we've done is extracted. This is what we want to do, is to be able to map everything to the same piece of code. So we came up with this notion of semantics to juice, where we are mapping the code to semantics to juice. So I'm going to just give you the idea that the key benefit of juice is it creates something that is highly indexable and that is, again, very immune to obfuscation, resistant to obfuscation. And that leads us to, I'm going to skip this for the interest of time here, a mechanism to do search, indexable search. So let me go a little bit further here. What it leads us to do is to be able to analyze malware in virtual machine. And so we've come up with a mechanism to analyze malware on VMs. So essentially what it means is we can now analyze malware in the cloud. So we can throw a lot of machines, and we could potentially analyze thousands of malware or hundreds of thousands of malware every day, just limited by the capacity of our machines that we have. And so we can do large-scale malware, automated malware analysis. And what that gives us is the ability to extract information from malware. So I'm going to skip this, and I'm going to the exciting case study that this research makes possible. So here's what happened. We went to, we had a sort of a field study in a financial services company. It's a large company, and for obvious reason I cannot reveal the name. But from them we received a large collection of malware that was quarantined over a period of time. So large collection here was really a subsample. We had about 600 or 800 zip files that contained malware quarantined by their anti-malware scanners. Once we analyzed the malware, and we put them in, we found similarity between them, and this graph here that you see visualizes the similarity between various malware that we found. It's a subset of it. So here, for example, this graph here shows that these 5 malware are mutually very similar. The graph on this right shows a bigger ball of malware, so much large ball of malware, and the density of edges means they're extremely similar. So you find that all of the malware, the 600 all zip file, contained a lot of malware that were extremely similar. Well, the most interesting is this next slide, where we picked one of this big group, and then we further analyzed this big group to see whether we could find anything more interesting in the malware. So we found that the same group, one group, had 3 different types of malware types as in different behavior. There's one that was opening one collection that was opening backdoors, one collection that was an ad pop-up. So this is a typically a malware that is used as a first point of entry. When you first get infected, it's typically a Trojan, some sort of a application that may introduce ability to pop up ads. So this is the ad pop-up, and there was another thing that was stealing password. So all of these three, backdoors, ad pop-up, password stealers, had a large collection of code that was very similar. So this is essentially going back to the part of malware code being expensive. You use common libraries to build different systems. But this is the interesting part, that the same organization received malware that had a different purpose, a pop-up, a backdoor, and an ad stealer, over a significant period of time. This, on the bottom is the time axis, 2013 to 2014 period of time. You spell it out on a different period of time. Now this is a very exciting evidence, because once you look at the behavior of a pop-up, typically the ad pop-up came first, and shortly after that we had a password stealer and a backdoor, and in different order, and they all ordered aimed at the same organization. Now the key part is, suppose you could go through your quarantine malware and you could then partition your quarantine malware into groups, and you can then study the time behavior when each malware came and what is the relationship between the malware, what the ability of the malware, what it tries to do. It gives you a snapshot of potential, it gives you an indication of potential attempt at targeted attacks targeted towards your organization. This could be the case where your malware scanner has stopped, and this person or this entity keeps attempting to go through your, to penetrate your environment. Okay. There's some more connections. So there's here in this case we found connections between very different family. The family is given by one of the major security company. They associates family names to a botnets, and we found that all these four botnet families had interaction, had significant code sharing and interaction between them. Okay, so this is just an example of showing similar code. This is actual code from two different botnets, Optima and Darknet, and this is a visual representation of code, and you can see how similar that is. And this is not library code. So I'm going to go further down. In interest of time, I'm going to see what this makes, what this research of being able to automatically extract information from malware and make connections. Now that the research is done, what could it make possible? What kind of technologies can you anticipate from it? So here's the first one that I see, I think is very, very feasible. It's a on-premise malware intelligence. So typically most organizations don't have malware analysis in the organization. They may have a few analysts, but by and large you are depending upon a security company like antivirus companies, or your someone like incident response companies to perform the analysis, and they are doing point analysis. They analyze an individual malware and they tell you something about that. But if you could do the analysis on premise for your quarantine malware, all of the malware that's been kept out by your antivirus system, so this is things that are quarantined, they're not infected you see a local, you can extract intelligence from that, and then you can construct some notion of targeted threat and feed it to your security operations center. That is very, very realistic and very feasible, where you can extract intelligence from malware on site same day as your antivirus system is extracting them. So your antivirus system scans the malware, throws it into quarantine. You can extract intelligence, connect that particular piece that you just kept out with the historical data that you've collected over time, and then give indicators of potential targeted threat to your security operation. This is extremely feasible, is feasible pretty much now. I think we're definitely likely to see the technology. And incidentally, that's the kind of technology that I'm attempting to bring to market through my startup. The other thing that you're likely to see is a global malware intelligence. This is where you are you're not in premise, but you're doing this in the cloud. Maybe there's a malware intelligence environment in the cloud that takes data from virus share, virus total, honeypots. This just collects malware all around the world and automatically, in reasonably real time, extracts intelligence and sends that information to various companies around the world. Various subscribers could be banks, laws, companies, and so on. So in this case, this is a global malware intelligence. That malware data is coming from virus total, virus share, honeypots around the world, and you're getting a pattern. And this could be done in real time, in reasonably real time. And the third possibility is, of course, you combine all of it, where you can do a global malware intelligence, you can do some local intelligence, and you can create a network of sharing this information. And subject to all the legal issues being sorted out, one could anticipate something of this nature happening, at least in the US, in the next 2 to 3 years. There are some bills in the Congress about sharing of, that enable sharing of malware cyber threat information, and once those bills go through, one could expect something of this nature happening. I think it's all realistic. So with that, I'm going to try to keep some time for question and answer. So I'm going to stop here. And essentially what I've said is malware does carries attackers' intelligence. We can harvest that intelligence automatically. And all of this is based on very sound principles. This is based on the economics of malware development, and that all of the research that we have done extracting malware is based on sound theory. It's based on machine learning. It's based on fundamentals of writing programs and extracting information from programs. And this is a direction that is being shaped by the US DoD. So you could expect in the near future significant technologies that would emerge in this space. And with that, I'm going to stop here and leave for you the status on the screen of where I am in this context of bringing one technology to market. With that, Priya, I'm going to like to hand over to you. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the presentation. It was great having you. And I'll just get on with a few questions. We don't have
Sure.
much time. We'll just get into one. How can malware intelligence be used by the organizations in terms of detection, prevention, or prediction?
So, thanks, Priya. That's a good question. So the key is that currently you have this malware that's quarantined, but you just have no idea about who it is that is trying to attack you, and you have no significant information. So the first part is it gives you a sort of a view of people outside your fence. So sort of partitions the malware into these are related, these are mutually connected, and these are not. So there might be some, in a sense, from early parts. So these are pranks. But here, this is actually attempted robbery. So the first thing it gives you is a landscape of your attacker. Once you have the landscape of the attacker, it's something now as an organization in your security operations centers, you have an additional piece of information. You can use it to determine if it's targeted attack, and then maybe improve your defenses, or maybe educate. Biggest weakness is the users. Maybe educate your users. So, for example, if you identify this attack or aimed towards your vice presidents or your secretaries, you could inform them to make them better prepared to respond to to not fall victim to that threat. You have another question? I can add some more to this.
Okay, yes, there is another one. What would be the recommended prerequisites for an organization to build malware intelligence capability?
So I think this is very simple now. Most organizations already have antivirus systems, so you're already blocking malware. That's already being done. Many of the organizations also quarantine and keep the quarantine. So they have repository of malware. They just sort of quarantine and keep it. And sometimes you keep it because for at a later time, should there be an attack or should there be an evidence of attack, you can somehow use it. That part is somehow. So if you already have this antivirus system and you have quarantine, then the part of building capability for malware intelligence is reasonably straightforward. For example, in my lab, we have a service, web service called Virus Battle. Virus as in computer virus, battle as in fighting and battle, virusbattle.com. And it's very simple. I mean, this is a system that's packaged where you can upload malware, and it's going to give you some notion of here's a malware that is similar with. So the ability to introduce malware intelligence is very, very straightforward. You acquire something like Virus Battle, and either in-house, in-premise, or web, and you populate it with the malware sample that you got coming in, things that you quarantine. And as you feed the data, it could report to your security analyst or something, either on a real-time basis or a daily basis, present a report that this is the kind of activity that's been happening. This is what the intent or the attempt malware is trying to do. Okay.
Okay. So
another question?
If anyone has any more questions, you can send it across to us. You can send it across to preetha.ash@cisoplatform.com or the contact given at the webinar. We will definitely get in touch with Dr. Arun and answer your questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Arun, for being there. It was a great webinar. Thank you, everybody from the audience. It was great having you. I'd also like to mention about the survey at the end of the webinar. There would be an automatic pop-up once you end your webinar, which would be the CISO Platform Index. So CISO Platform Index is a user-based rating for security products. So we request you to rate products, security products only, that you have used on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. Once you just end the webinar, that's the survey form that you get. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to meet you again in the next Best of the World series webinar.